So it's not too common to meet people who have the same goals and interests. So.
Yeah, me too. We can exchange some.
So we're going to start on the first panel, the plenary panel today, which is focused on the issue of sustainability. I'm Warren Bell. I'm a family physician from Salmon Arm, British Columbia. That's the land of the Enbridge Northern Gateway Pipeline, and if you haven't heard of that, then you've probably heard of salmon, and you haven't heard of that, you've probably heard of the Kinder Morgan Pipeline, and if you haven't heard of that, you've probably heard of fracking. That's what we do in BC when we're trying to attract attention from the rest of the country. So sustainability is an important issue, and I think today we're going to have an opportunity to hear three people speak from a position of considerable expertise and direct insight about not just sustainability in this part of the world, but all over the world. I'm going to introduce each speaker as they come up, because there are some specific things that I think you'll need to know about each of them. Our first speaker is a biological anthropologist, which I think is a marvelous way of looking at the world. Humans and biology. It's about time we started to think about that. It's about time that science played a role in public policy, and we all have a little biology circulating around inside us. Lucilla Spini is, as you can tell from her name, her first language was Italian, and I might say that all of the speakers today have a first language other than English, and I think that's a very appropriate way to start off a conference. We're not all Anglophones, and there are many other tongues in this world that need to be heard. Currently, Lucilla is the program officer for the World Academy of Sciences for the advancement of science, specifically in developing countries, and that's based in Trieste, Italy. But I might say that's only one country. She certainly transcended a lot of boundaries in her educational experiences, studying at Oxford, studying New York University. In addition, she has, just to make it a little more local, two Canadian affiliations. One is with Waterloo, where she's a professor in anthropology, assistant professor there, and she's also an adjunct professor in the School of Geography and Earth Sciences at McMaster. With a background like that, she could probably talk about 70 or 80 different topics with great expertise and experience, but today she's going to focus on water, and especially water when there's too much of it in the form of floods, and water when there isn't enough in the form of droughts. So the full title is On Floods and Droughts, the Water/Health Nexus within the Context of Community Change. That sounds very academic, but I don't believe you're going to get a totally academic presentation. Lucilla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, where's the slides? Okay, so I'm gonna take the opportunity to start my talk as it was started, the conference. So where I come from, we say ciao. So ciao to everybody. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Many thanks to Neil, especially, for the invitation and for keeping me up to date on the development of this great conference. I'm very, very happy to be here. I think that this is a very important gatherings where we don't look just at one topic, but we look at problems from an holistic perspective. And so today I'm going to be talking about water. One of my favorite topics, actually, because water, as we heard this morning, as we sang this morning, water is life. And so it can really be something that can be a theme that encompasses throughout the entire conference. But before I get into details about water crisis, about extreme events, conflicts, cooperation, and human well-being, allow me also to frame this presentation with some word with the boss of all the organization that I work in, the UN. Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the UN Secretary General. All are places where shortages of water contribute to poverty. They cause social hardship and impede development. They create tension in conflict-prone regions. Too often, where we need water, we find guns. There's still enough water for all of us, but only so long as we keep it clean, use it more wisely, and share it fairly. This last sentence is very important. It was highlighted also by the UN Water, the interagency coordination mechanism of the UN focusing on water issue. There is enough fresh water on the planet for 7 billion people, but it's distributed unevenly. Too much of it is wasted, polluted, and unsustainably managed. So these are very important points, I think, to keep in mind when discussing sustainability, when discussing health, and most of all, when discussing peace. Water, the accessibility of water, water security is a sine qua non to peace. So I hope that today I'm going to give you an overview on these issues, that will be something that you could keep thinking throughout all the different discussion and workshops. In particular, on the basis of my background, the biological anthropologist, and my 10 years experience within the UN system working on environment and health issues, I will give you an overview on the water crisis, the conflicts related to it, the cooperation, and I will conclude by framing on issue related to human well-being. The water crisis. What's the water crisis? It's 780 million people do not have access to clean water, and almost 2.5 billion do not have access to adequate sanitation. These are pretty big numbers. And water scarcity, when, this morning we talk about the problems with democracy. The water scarcity is a pretty democratic process, actually. Affects every continent, no one excluded. And water scarcity is both a natural and human-made phenomenon. And by 2025, which is not that long ago, I calculated, I'll be 50 by then, 1.8 billion people will be living in countries or regions with absolute water scarcity. Plus, just to paint a little bit more black these pictures, the whole issue is exacerbated by climate change. We had the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report some weeks ago. And of course, we know that extreme events like floods, droughts, are exacerbating the water crisis. There's also another variable in it, just to make it even more, doom. Pollution. We keep polluting. We've been talking about a long time that we should do things to avoid pollution and so on. But, to drink, I think this morning was said to drink to drink clean water is quite a luxury this way. And pollution, as water, knows no boundaries. Water is a resource that knows no boundaries. So water scarcity, pollution, climate change have no boundaries. And this leads to two things. One is conflicts, because people scramble over resources, but also can lead to cooperation. So I'm going to continue now with the sad pictures, and then I'm going to move into more sort of bright and sunshine pathways related to cooperation. Conflicts. So I'm going to talk about two types of conflicts. One, conflicts among sectors, among priorities. And the second one, the more traditional conflicts, the one that we saw on TV between countries. Concerning the first one, allow me to say that, for example, there's always been a demand for water and a demand for energy. There will be demands for agriculture. And all these sectors will be fighting against each other to get more water out of the equations. Just to let you know, for example, that agriculture is currently the largest user of water at the global level, accounting for 70% of total withdrawal. So it's quite a big chunk of the pie here, considering for how many other purposes we use water. But of course, and these processes are currently being studied by the international community, by the UN system, because all these conflicts are related to the fact that all these sectors have been put in very solid silos, very, very distinct boxes. That's how we like to work, right? Even if we say we should do interdisciplinary and stuff like that. We put things into boxes, and then we try to put the water across. But things are changes. And as also highlighted some month ago almost, during the World Water Day, which was focusing on water and energy. And so we're working more and more on nexuses. Nexuses, for example, to look at how we can reconcile the approach, for example, to the water, energy, and food systems in order to make sure that we find win-win situation for all these demands. But let me get to more traditional type of conflicts, the one that we usually hear on TV. Sometimes water is not really pictured as the cause of the conflict. Mostly it's related to political issues or, economic issues. But many, many times, actually, water could be the primary cause for the conflict. And conflicts between countries can be related to water diversion, for example, water scarcity, or water pollution. Let's remember what we said at the beginning. Water has no boundaries. And so water doesn't carry a passport that crosses the border to the other country. And so sometimes different countries have problems in being fair maybe to the other countries, to the other neighboring countries. One of the examples that we see is related to the Nile River. I'm sure some of you might have heard on TV all the problems related to dams on the Nile River. There are different treaties regulating the transboundary waters. And for example, the Nile River basin is subject to treaties. Also because there are about over 160 million people living in that area. It includes 10 countries that rely significantly on its water, since most of these countries have no effective rainfalls, and so they also rely on this also for fishing and hydroelectricity generation. According to the treaties, only Egypt and Sudan are legally entitled to dam the river. But this is not the actual true in the day-to-day life. So other countries are looking into dams and building dams in that respect. And so the treaties have been breached. But it's still important to try to foster a culture of cooperation and create opportunity for making sure that the resource is shared wisely and fairly across the basin. And in this context, concerning cooperation, there is the Nile Basin Initiative that is working towards addressing this particular conflict. And of course, there are many other different conflicts that we see around the world. But I would like really to dwell a little bit more on the positive side of things, given that we're talking about peace. So how can we foster peace? The Nile Basin Initiative is one of the initiatives really fostering dialogue and cooperation to see how all the countries are meeting their needs in terms of waters around the Nile River. And so water cooperation is really a key to peace and development. And this was recognized in 2013, the International Year of Water Cooperation, which was an international year recognized by UN General Assembly. And why water cooperation important? Water cooperation important for peace and security. We need to achieve water security for all, also to achieve peace and security for all. Water cooperation is important for sustainable development and environmental sustainability. Water is part of each of the 3 pillars of sustainability: the social, the environmental, and the economic pillars of sustainability. Water is key for poverty alleviation and universal water access. So water is the sine qua non to sanitation service and water supplies for everybody on Earth. And this is promoted by the UN Water, which is the interagency mechanism of the UN, which includes, so breaking the silences, includes all the organizations in the UN system working on water. So from UNICEF, for example, to the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment and Health, which I hope some of you know that is based in Hamilton, Ontario. And UN Water is also promoting further awareness of these important issues. And allow me to recall here that we're currently in Dedicate Water for Life, 2005 and 2015. And I encourage all of you to go and look up the website, and there are also lots of activities that each of you can be engaged on. So as I said, in terms of water cooperation, there's a lots of work being done in terms of developing agreements, cooperation agreements, in order to frame dialogue. It's easier to foster dialogue if it's something written up and co-signed by different parties. And allow me to say that I was very surprised when I actually found the actual number in terms of agreements on international waters. Almost 450 agreements on international waters were signed between 1820 and 2007. Quite a big number. And I think, of course, some of them might just be paper agreements. We have to be honest with ourselves. But others are really making a difference on the ground. I would like to mention just a couple of them. I'm not going to list the 451, just for the sake of time. But, for example, I would like to mention the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands, which is looking at water in terms of an ecosystem perspective of the wetlands ecosystem. But also, I would like really to draw your attention on something new happening on the water agreement scene, the Water Convention. So I just want to, and its protocol on water and health. I just want to have a show of hands of people who have heard of the Water Convention before. 1, 2. Oh, good. Usually not. Usually I got 0 hands when I present this. The Water Convention is a pan-European agreement, and it's actually the Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Water Courses and International Lakes. It was adopted in Helsinki in 1992 and entered into force in 1996. Almost all countries sharing transboundary waters in the region of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe are parties to the convention. So it's really a convention that focuses on that transboundary issue and promoting water cooperation in that framework. In 1999, a protocol was also included to the convention focusing on water and health. And it's an amazing mechanism because for example, when you go to a conference of the parties, a meeting of the parties to the protocol on water and health, each country will have a delegation including 1 member from the Ministry of Environment and 1 from the Ministry of Health. So this is quite an innovative approach to look at health and the water issue in the overall international framework. But this was just, of course, a pan-European mechanism, a regional mechanism. But finally, the convention got amended, and the amendment entered into force on 6th of February 2013, turning the Water Convention into a global legal framework for transboundary water cooperation. So finally, today, in 2014, we actually have a global agreement on water, because we didn't have one beforehand. So any country, besides even beyond the pan-European region, can actually ratify the convention. So we see these are examples of cooperation frameworks and mechanisms. And allow me to say that cooperation can lead to great achievement. And I just would like to point out one related to water and human well-being. Allow me to recall the Millennium Development Goals. We're reaching the deadline here, so everybody's counting up how much we've done well or not, and how much we should do more. And in particular, the MDG number 7, ensure environmental sustainability, and its target 3, halve by 2015 the proportion of the population without sustainable access to safe drinking water and basic sanitation. And actually, this is one of the most successful MDGs and targets, actually, because amongst the achievements we had that more than 2.1 billion people have gained access to improved drinking water sources since 1990, exceeding the MDG target. But of course, this is a good news, but there's still lots to do, lots to be done in order to make sure, as we say in the post-Millennium Development Goal phase, that no one is excluded, that we still continue to make sure that everybody has access to safe drinking water and basic sanitation. So as it was said this morning, we need to live in harmony with nature. We need to speak for the water. We need to make sure that to continue to foster cooperation through agreement, but also through dialogue like this conference. Because there's still enough water for all of us, but only so long as we keep it clean, use it more wisely, and share it fairly. Thank you very much.
I think mille grazie means thank you in Italian. Working. Lucilla pointed out that 70% of the world's water supply is used for agriculture. Well, we all know what happens when you frack. Fracking ruins contaminates water in ways that we don't even fully understand, and also uses enormous amounts of water. And maybe one day, if we keep things the way they're going, agriculture will take a second place to fracking. If that happens, we're all in big trouble, and I hope it doesn't. Our next speaker, je connais un peu, c'est un homme qui travaille dans la province de Québec, le pays de Québec. On dit des voix, mais pas ici. Aujourd'hui, c'est la province. Eric Notebaert has many accomplishments, and he's only talking about one of them today, but he has been working for many years in Quebec on a whole range of issues. Some of you may recall the asbestos fiasco in Quebec, where the government was going to put a whole bunch of money, $50 million, into a reopening an asbestos mine, and Eric was very instrumental in mobilizing the medical profession to actually speak out, which it's often very reluctant to do, against this idea. Thank heavens we had a little change of government, and that facilitated the process as well. But Eric's been working on that and many other issues in the province of Quebec that have made a huge difference for the rest of the country. And today he's going to talk about a success story that he's been actively involved with. I should mention, by the way, he's a professor of medicine at the University of Montreal and has been working in emergency rooms for a number of years, but I think that's now in the past. Now he's going to devote himself full-time to these kinds of issues that we're talking about today. Et d'autres choses aussi. Today he's going to talk about the shutting down of the one and only nuclear power reactor in Quebec. And it's a dramatic story, and I'm sure you'll enjoy because it's a success story. Eric Notebaert, mon plaisir.
So, sorry, take a few seconds just to see that. I thought I had a monitor in front of me. I don't, so I must check my slides at the same time. So I'll start the timer to be sure to be on time. Should be okay. There we go. Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad to be here to see old friends from years ago. Welcome in Toronto, and a special welcome for the people of the Boston area. I know it's a hard morning. Last night was a great game, and Canadians won. The slap shot that won the game was just wonderful from PEGASUS. It's a hard morning, but still we have to proceed and to do what we have to do. So I like stories. And I'll tell you 13 small stories of people who changed the situation in Quebec, who changed the energy policies in Quebec. And then one big story, the study, the thing we won 2 years ago. I'll tell you about our main arguments and why we think all this worked. So first man, Michel Fugère, a citizen from Trois-Rivières. Trois-Rivières is the city right in front of the former Gentilly 2 power plant. He's been involved in many environmental debates before, and he created what is called the Mouvement Vert Mauricie, if you may say, the Green Movement of Mauricie, which is a big area. And it was a gathering of 60 to 80 NGOs and environmental groups who got together in 2008 to try to focus on the closure of Gentilly 2. Another wonderful man, Philippe Giroul, retired teacher from Trois-Rivières. In 2008, he started to work as the secretary of the Mouvement Vert Mauricie. He made just an incredible job linking together the people from the area and many specialists in different fields, whether they be engineers, mathematicians, physicians, or any specialists who were in the field. He was always constantly linking the specialists and the people of the area. Now, a great guy, Sébastien Bois, was a journalist from Trois-Rivières, very committed small journal. He came to the movement mainly because he was in love and wanted to have children. And was a bit afraid, obviously. So he's an activist, humorist. He organized public debates, concerts, shows, simulation of nuclear accident, and so on. Obviously, with Sébastien Bois came Nadia Boutillette, the girlfriend of the former. Trained as a nutritionist, she met Sébastien, decided to get involved. Nadia organized numerous meetings with the women of the area, with also the natives of a tribe that is just close by Gentilly 2, and I think it is because of this tribe and because of the work we've done with this tribe that things got working. You may recall that there was 2 meta-analyses and one big study, the KIC study, that were published in 2008. Exactly at that time, we had meetings with the women and the natives there. And the result of, I'll show you the result of these meta-analyses because it helped us a lot. Jacques Dagenet, an economist, businessman renowned in the area, who was always constantly asking the provincial and the government, the federal government, about the economics of nuclear industry. As you may say, it's a whole. I mean, we're pouring money in this industry. It's just incredible. Everybody knows Gordon Edwards. Gordon Edwards, a PhD in nuclear physics from, PhD in mathematician and PhD, who's kept on explaining us the details of so complex issues like the nuclear industry. It is hard to understand these machines, but Gordon, as you may know, has been constantly explaining us the details of the machine. Now, Michel Duguay, PhD, engineer, former worker of the nuclear industry in the United States from 1961 until 1985, finally became convinced after discussing with the U.S. Energy Policy Committee that the CANDU machine was a dangerous, an unstable machine, and a very polluting machine. So this is why Michel Duguay decided to quit the business and to start to work with us, to try to close Gentilly 2. Now, a great man, Pierre Jasmin, an artist who created Les Artistes pour la Paix, Artists for Peace, who kept on doing shows, concerts, and bringing artists to our movement, because you know that if your heart is not there, nothing will move. If you just function with your brain, nothing will move. So the artists were always there to contribute to the movement, and this was a very important contribution, I think. Mayor Gaëtan Ruet, totally different, an engineer, mayor of a small city, Amqui, in Quebec, Mayor Ruet was always interested in renewable energies, and when he found out that the CANDU was an unstable machine, he decided to convince municipalities, so cities in Quebec. And he got together more than 400 to 500 cities who signed a petition against the nuclear machine CANDU in Gentilly. Karel Méran, president of the David Suzuki Foundation in Montreal, and this helped us a lot because, as you may recall, the David Suzuki Foundation took a stand against nuclear energy in Canada. So it was helpful to have the David Suzuki Foundation with us. Michael, great source of inspiration. Michael is probably the person who brought me in PGS years ago. He was, I think, the first president of Health Professional for Global Survival, which is the Quebec. It's always a bit different in Quebec. You know, we're health professionals, well, not only the physician. We have to be a bit different. So, but even Michael was a bit different at the beginning, so he called it this way. Michael has been, as you may know, he was always there. In every meeting, in every demonstration, in every conference, Michael has been there. And, well, thank you, Michael. Juan Carlos, that you met a bit before. Juan Carlos, also one of the, how do you say, pillars of our movement, at least in Montreal and in Canada also, who's been also very interested in the links, and you heard him before, between nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. And Juan Carlos is, well, source of comfort always when we see each other. We live at a few blocks from each other. Marcel Jeté. We cannot talk about all this fight without talking about Marcel Jeté, former worker, of Gentilly too. Sorry, I forgot something. Yes. Who got 2 cancers, finally died from his lymphoma. Who knows? Is it linked to the CANDU reactor? Nobody will be able to affirm this. But Marcel Jeté was always there to tell us that besides the statistics, there are human beings. And Marcel Jeté was always there to say, you know, there are human beings who suffer. So, and many other people, okay? Many people work for this. And there's a filmmaker there, Christian Simard from Nature Québec, Marc Fafard, the people from Sept-Îles who blocked the uranium mining project in Quebec. So these people were there and they got together. So the story, in 1983, the Gentilly 2 nuclear reactor, CANDU 60 reactor, was started operating right in front of Trois-Rivières, which is a big city in Quebec. In 1978, there was a creation of the Canadian Coalition for Nuclear Responsibility by Gordon Edwards at that time, and one of the reasons why he started this movement is because before Gentilly 2, there was Gentilly 1, the former nuclear plant that was a total fiasco that lasted 180 days, and they had to shut it down because it was too unstable. It was a joke, but a costly joke. In 1986, the Mouvement Vert Mauricie asked for public hearings on Gentilly 2. And finally, in 2004, this is when we really got into it, we had the BAP. The BAP is the Bureau d'Audience Publique sur l'Environnement, so there are public hearings on the environment in Quebec. So we have BAP on almost everything. We had BAP on uranium, on asbestos, on different issues. And the conclusion of this BAP at that time, it's an independent body who gives advices to the government, was that the refurbishment of Gentilly Gentilly 2 is not a technical issue, it's a societal, how do you say? I've got always problem with this word, societal issue. And it's something that must be decided with all the population, not only among engineers, not only among specialists in the field. So in 2008, in the middle of summer, exactly during the Olympic Games, and exactly at the moment where Alexandre Despatie, the diver, you may recall, was diving during the Olympic Games, exactly at that very moment, the provincial government announced quietly that it would refurbish Gentilly 2. I think the government was absolutely sure that everybody was watching TV and not listening to what they say. But the NGOs were just outrageous, and we got together, and there was a major opposition. Within a couple of weeks, more than 60 NGOs in Quebec got together. There were natives, environmental groups, grassroots people. We got together and we decided that it would not be the case. We would block would block this project. And I'll show you a few studies in a few minutes that will tell you why we were so convinced that we had to stop this project. So petitions, scientific symposia were done. And I guess one of the highlights of this was when we crossed the river with natives. We took canoes in front of Gentilly 2, crossed the St. Lawrence River, went right in front of the nuclear plant, and there it was quite funny because there was people from the army, people from the police, like with machine guns telling us, well, don't come here, this is a private place, you are not allowed to come. Just said, well, Hydro-Québec belongs to us. I mean, we can come there, we can protest, we can block or stop the project. So this was very interesting because it was one of the times when we were on the air with natives in the area that helped us in closing the plant. Everybody recalls Fukushima, who had an impact, obviously, on our fight. In 2012, things got more intense. A film was shot by, well, it was shot during the years before, by a woman in Quebec that is called Gentilly or Not to Be. The film was released, and it was shocking for many people. It had a major impact on politicians, on the energy sector, nuclear industry, and the ecologists. A couple of weeks after September 22, the new provincial government was elected, and it decided to stop the refurbishment, so to close down Gentilly 2. What is the future? Well, the decommissioning of Gentilly 2, which is not an easy thing. Nuclear garbages were stuck with waste, obviously, everywhere in Canada. The uranium mining, because we're trying now to have a full moratorium on uranium mining in Quebec. And, well, you'll hear about this very soon, I guess. And the remaining possibility of an accident. Now, what were our main arguments? There are many of them. My arguments were the arguments of a physician. So, very briefly, within 15 minutes, I'll tell you the conclusion. You know them, but just to put you into context. The Beer 7 conclusions, the small and older Canadian studies, the meta-analysis and the case control studies, the can-do and the treat-some problem. There was also nuclear garbages, nuclear accidents, civil and military costs, and the false argument of nuclear medicine. So I'll talk a bit more on what is in red, maybe in what is in black, but I'm not sure. Okay. This is something that you know that is published every couple of years, the Beer report from the National Research Council in the US. And it's called the biological effect of ionizing radiation. And its conclusion in the last report is always the same one. There is no such thing as a dose under which there is no risk for health. And the Beer concludes that the best curve to describe this, I mixed up my things. Okay, is the A curve. So if you link together the absorbed dose and the induced incidence of cancer, they consider it's a linear curve. So the more you have a dose, the more you have risk of getting a cancer. So it means also that even at low dose, you may get a cancer. There's no such thing as a safe dose. And it's something that we see also in medicine. I do mostly trauma medicine in a trauma center. And as you may know, as physicians, we have more and more studies telling us that CT scans are dangerous. I mean, you cannot expose people to radiation without thinking, at least thinking that you may have harm. And in traumatology now, we know that with a full body scan that gives 10 millisievert to a body, every 2,000 to 5,000 exams, you will induce death by cancer, okay? Mostly by thyroid cancer, but you will induce death. And we now know that with an abdopelvic CT scan, if you're a baby of 1 year old, at every 1,000 scan, you will induce a cancer. And if you're a teenager, at every 2,000 more or less scan, you will induce a cancer. And with an old man like me, I'm joking, but after 50 years old, usually you may get a cancer at every 10,000 scans. So this is serious business. And when the Canadian Commission on Nuclear, how is it called, CCNR, not CCNR, the Canadian Commission on, c'est quoi la CNSC? How do you call it in English? Nuclear Safety Commission says that under 10 millisievert, there is no risk for health. It's lying. It's simply lying. And we've had arguments with them for the past 20 years because they are lying. I mean, at 10 millisievert, you can get a cancer. So quickly, a couple of important Canadian studies and then the big one. First study that was published in the 90s, it's an ecological study, so weak type of study, if you may say, with small number of cases and a large radius. And they discovered that up to 14 years old, there was a higher incidence of leukemias with children, but it was not statistically significant. So it was a small n and a large radius. It's very hard to conclude anything. Another interesting study, the occupational exposure of fathers to ionizing radiation and the risk of leukemia in offspring, a case control study, so somewhat higher level of study. They compared 112 children with cancer and 890 controls, children living near a nuclear plant from 50 to 88. Also there, an increased incidence of leukemia, mostly among children of fathers working in uranium mines. Again, not statistically significant because of too small study. Now let's come to tritium. The study called Tritium Releases from the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station, Birth Defects and Infant Mortality in 1991 by Rudo et al. Ecological study, they studied congenital malformations, neonatal mortality, abortions from Pickering at 25 kilometers radius from Pickering, increase in incidence of Down syndrome correlated with tritium air, and an association with malformations, again, small study. So we'll come to the more interesting one. Another study, a case control study of father-children born in this period of time with congenital anomaly versus other fathers, and they found out that the greater the irradiation among fathers of children, the greater malformations you could have. And two last ones, the study of an ecological study in Durham. So around Pickering and Darlington, they looked at chromosomic anomalies and cancers, and their conclusion was that it was impossible to conclude that there's a causal link, but there was more people with anomalies at that time. Now, a study that, well, you see, where am I? Okay. Okay, with increase in many different things, as you say, neural tube defects, Down syndrome, leukemia, thyroid cancer, etc., etc. Now, I want to show you a study that was a major study that was published by Lydia Zablocka, and everybody in the world talked about this study, except I guess in Canada. It was not so published, not so publicized. The analysis of mortality among Canadian nuclear power industry workers after chronic low-dose radiation exposure to ionizing radiation, 45,000 workers in New Brunswick, Quebec, and Saskatchewan. And what they found out was that the excess relative risk of death by leukemia was at 52.5, which was really significant. So it's a powerful study that clearly demonstrates that the more you are linked to nuclear industry, the more you are exposed to ionizing radiation, the more you can have leukemia. Now, the three major studies that you probably have heard of and that change our way of seeing things are the two meta-analyses and the KIC study. Well, in the meta-analysis, they decided that as it was so hard to demonstrate an increase in leukemia when you take just one nuclear power plant with a small number of cases, they meta-analyzed all the studies. So we had three major studies: the Baker study, a meta-analysis of 136 sites in 8 countries; the Mangano study, a meta-analysis of 51 sites in 67 counties; and the famous KIC study. So the Baker study, around 136 nuclear power plants, uranium mines, and reprocessing sites. They grouped together 17 studies. Some of them were Canadian studies. In the majority of the studies, there was an increased incidence of leukemias, but it was not statistically significant. Now, when they combined the studies together, what they saw was that there was an increased incidence of leukemia by 22% and an increased incidence of mortality by 24%, mostly in the children less than 9 years old and at under 16 kilometers from the power plants. So this meta-analysis, it's not a cause and effect relationship, it's a meta-analysis. but there's a clear association between the proximity of a nuclear plant and the risk of having leukemias among small children. So, no publication bias, the incidence, the meta-standardized incidence ratio was over 1, marked incidence, as I said, of leukemia in the 0 to 9 years old group. The other very interesting one, the Mangano study. In this study, she looked at 51 US nuclear reactors in 67 counties with a population of 25,000 people. So this is quite big. And very interesting, she divided her study into 3 things: the nuclear plants that started, the oldest nuclear plants, the newest nuclear plants, and the nuclear plants that were later shut down. Now, the conclusion, 14% increase in mortality near the oldest power plant, a 9% increase in mortality near the newest power plant, and look at this, a 5% mortality reduction near the power plants that were shut down. So she could see that if you shut down a power plant, then you can observe a decreased mortality in this area. So, and this was statistically significant. So many other conclusions, I don't want to go into all the conclusions, but what is interesting is that it's really close by. The statistics are really like the study of Baker. So the famous KIC study that made the German government stop its nuclear industry, or let's say slowly close the nuclear industry because it got a bit more complicated after. In this study that was financed by the government, they studied 60 nuclear power plants in Germany. It was a case control study, so they checked 593 cases of leukemia with 107,000 or so controls, and the government was so sure that they could not see an increased level of leukemias that they said, well, we're more than ready to finance this study because you'll come up with no result. Well, fortunately enough, if you look at the leukemias under 5 kilometers, the odds ratio for having a leukemia was at more than 2, and under 10 kilometers it was at 133. So you can see the beautiful line, if I can say, linking the closeness to the power plant to the risk of getting a leukemia among children. Obviously, the KIC study was a major work, and its conclusions were that risks are clearly linked to the proximity of a nuclear reactor, and this was statistically significant at under 5 kilometers, which was interesting for us because the Gentilly 2 nuclear plant was at around 5 kilometers from the city of Trois-Rivières. There are many farms around. It's a place where there are many farms. Again, an association, not a causality, because you can't say, you can't talk about this. So if we conclude the studies, and this is what we've kept saying to the people when we made our few conferences, is that the oldest studies that have been frequently funded by the government or by the industry, and very frequently, the methodology was poorer. They had a small number of cases, and they diluted everything into a wide area, but we could see tendencies of increased cancers and so on. Whereas in the more recent studies in the past 6 years, well, the methodology has improved a lot. We use meta-analysis, and now we can see that there are statistically significant results. So I think that this was something that helped us quite a lot. A few words about tritium. Tritium, well, we talked a lot about water, the importance of water this morning, and also the beautiful people from the 2 tribes this morning told us about how water is important. Now, what is tritium? It's radiated water. So tritium is H3. It gives a beta emitter at a short distance, and it really does integrate to all your cells. So I feel a bit of pressure. So yeah, so I'll just go a bit faster. Tritium is easily fixed on DNA. It incorporates on more fragile cells, so cells in rapid development. It really has a powerful impact on organogenesis and genetic material. Now, how come in Canada we accept to have a very high level of tritium in water to 7,000 becquerel per liter? In the US, the maximum allowable dose of tritium is 740 becquerel per liter. In Europe, you're not allowed to have more than 100 tritium per becquerel. per liter, and in California and in Colorado, I think now the maximum level allowable is 18 becquerel per liter. So in Canada, we must be very, very, very resistant because the government allows us to tolerate 7,000 becquerel. Well, the reason is simple, is because if we use 18 becquerel, we'll have to shut down all our CANDU reactors because it's one of the reactors that produce the highest amount of tritium in the world. So in the BAP study, what did we find years ago? Look at the level of tritium in the water just around the power plants. It's incredible. So surface water in winter, 60,000, underwater, 20,000, et cetera, et cetera. So our CANDU reactors do produce a lot of tritium, and we are exposed to this tritium. And this is a study that was done by Iron 30 years ago, just showing the level of tritium in the air. You've got a lot of tritium also in the air around the power plants. I think I'll just leave these things, maybe just quick, because this is something that I've been asked a lot during the last years. The importance of uranium for nuclear medicine. It's absolutely not important. We can do, well, technetium is used mostly, as you know, for diagnosis procedure. It's not used for treatment, and more we can use ultrasound, we can use something else. But the technetium can be generated by what we call an accelerator, a cyclotron, just in the big hospitals. We don't need uranium. We don't need nuclear power plants to produce uranium. And this can be done at a fraction of the cost of a uranium power plant. So with a small accelerator that can be built in Toronto, in Sherbrooke, there is one, in Calgary or elsewhere, we can have some technetium-99, we can do our diagnosis procedures, and this will be much safer. Okay, so our conclusions. Well, this was a teamwork that lasted 30 years. And it could not have been done without the contribution of every single people. The people I mentioned you before, the people from the area, the natives who were with us. There was a huge commitment, and as I tell you, it lasted a long time. Sometimes people were a bit fed up with everything, but still we finally got it working. There was a great contribution by experts, whether they be engineers, mathematicians, physicians, or not, and many of the people who are here, I'm thinking about Michael, went to meet people, and we had discussions, sessions, explanations about all this business, and I think it did help. We tried to have this based on evidence. I was stressing the importance of the meta-analysis, the case control studies, and I was always stressing that it was not a cause and effect relationship. It was an association. I could not say that this nuclear power plant was causing this cancer to these children, but still the association was there. And we're always based our contribution on what we call the precautionary principle. I think you say it this way. Why expose people to something that may be dangerous? There are many, well, healthier ways of living. So I know it's not a thunderstorm, but it's an avalanche of information. I always tend to give too much in a small amount of time, but I hope you enjoyed it.
Merci beaucoup.
Thanks.
How many of you have had your doctor talk that much in the office? Eric brought three important points: science, teamwork, and something you mentioned earlier at the beginning, and that is the role of Aboriginal people, especially in this country, but all over the world, in advancing sustainability issues. And now we have all three coming forward in one presentation. We're very, very lucky to have with us Alfonso Morales, who's come to us from Ecuador with his team to help translate his presentation about the work he has been doing, which sprang out of resistance to a dictatorship in his country and has been focused on the work of Indigenous peoples to advance sustainability against odds that in this country we would find almost unbearable. But in a country like Ecuador, there is a very different social environment, and it has been a much more difficult road, and he has, I think, manifested great courage and persistence in achieving his goals. Now, with Alfonso, we have Marie Carmen, who's going to come and translate. We talked about different languages here. Alfonso's original language is Quechua, which is an Aboriginal language in Ecuador. He speaks Spanish as a second language, and we're going to try and translate into a third language, which is the one we've been gifted with in this part of the world. We also have Allison, who's going to do some slide movement. And so we have a tightly coordinated, global, international, multilingual presentation coming to you about sustainability in an Aboriginal community. Alfonso Morales.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, buenos días
Good
con
morning.
todos y todas.
To everyone.
Y bueno, primero dar gracias
He wants to say thank
a nuestra Pachamama,
you to the Mother of
la Madre
Earth,
Naturaleza.
Pachamama, the nature.
Y bueno, por una parte, dar gracias a todas las personas
He's
que han
grateful
hecho el
to all the
esfuerzo de
people
traerme
that,
aquí,
to all the people that brought him here.
como doctora Andrea Evans y doctora
As
Allison.
Andrea,
Y
Allison,
aquí está Neil,
Neil,
que nos ha podido visitar nuestra comunidad, como Carolina.
who has visited the community in the Andes.
Y gracias a ellos estoy aquí.
Thanks to them, he's here.
Y voy a presentar un poquito lo que es una organización indígena en el Ecuador.
And now he's going to present make a presentation about his community in Ecuador.
Bueno, creo que el Ecuador es muy pequeño, ¿no?
Ecuador is a
Entonces,
small
ver con
country.
Canadá.
It's not like Canada.
Entonces, bueno, tenemos un mapa, más o menos,
There is a map
de lo que estamos ubicados
Oh.
dentro de lo que es el Ecuador
where Ecuador is located and also his community.
y la provincia de Imbabura, desde donde yo vengo, desde un cantón Cotacachi.
The province of Ibarra, where he comes from.
Bueno, este es el tema más que todo en el tema del agua, que se habla mucho,
He's going to talk about the water.
y todo lo que está la parte azul está
Oh.
declarado como una reserva.
All the blue part is a reserve.
Y la reserva tiene mucha agua, muchas plantas, entonces por esa razón en el 1968 se declaró como una reserva para proteger.
Sorry. The reserve was declared as one of it in 1968 and has a lot of water and natural resources.
Y por esa razón las comunidades indígenas que viven alrededor de la reserva,
Because of that, the indigenous communities that lives around the reserve,
entonces estamos cuidando mucho.
they're taking care of the reserve.
Pero muchas veces el Estado o la gente que vive en la ciudad no ven cómo es la situación.
However, the government and the people that live in the cities don't see how is the situation in the communities and the reserve.
Y por esa razón la organización, como una organización indígena, hemos propuesto declarar.
Because of that, the indigenous organization has decided to make a declaration.
Y bueno, en realidad nosotros estamos en una altitud bastante grande, que tenemos la montaña, lo llamamos Mama Cotacachi.
Actually, they live in a high altitude community you can see there 4,939 meters over the sea level.
Y bueno, nosotros vivimos dentro más o menos desde los 2.400 hasta 3.000 que se hace la agricultura.
They live between 2,400 and 3,000 meters over the sea level when they use for agricultural purposes.
Bueno, nosotros decimos que tenemos dos temporadas, que sería el verano y el invierno.
They have 2 seasons, winter and summer.
Entonces, la precipitación anual que tenemos de 800 a 1.000 litros por año, que estaríamos hablando del agua de lluvia.
About the rain, they have between 800 and 1,000 millimeters per year. Perdón, por año.
Por año.
800 milímetros.
Sí, ¿no?
800 millimeters per year.
Y bueno, en realidad para nosotros es una preocupación también, es la tenencia de tierra por familia. Estamos hablando menos de 1 hectárea por familia, por decir.
One of the concerns is that the owner of the land, they have less than hectare, sorry, but I don't know the word, per family.
Y también decimos que el 50% de las comunidades que están en la parte más alta no tienen riego.
50% of the communities that are located in the highest part of the land, they don't have any irrigation system.
Porque la mayor parte han llevado son las haciendas.
Because the majority of the big farms have taken the water.
Y también en otras partes lo que están utilizando es más para la hidroeléctrica.
And they are also using the water for hydroelectric purposes.
Entonces, por esa razón, estamos luchando con esta nueva ley que se está discutiendo en el Ecuador.
They are fighting against a law that is
En la Asamblea Nacional, bueno, Congreso.
Okay. They are fighting against a law that is probably going to perpetuate the purposes that he was mentioning before.
Y decimos que dentro de estas comunidades el 80% son indígenas.
Inside this community, 80% of the population is indigenous.
Y el 20% son mestizos.
And 20
campesinos.
of them mestizos.
Y bueno, dentro de lo que es, son 3.225 familias, alrededor de unos 15.800 personas que vivimos.
They have around 3,225 families in the community, and the total population, 15,800 people living there.
Entonces, estas conforman la organización que es la UNORCAC.
All of them for the community organization called UNORCAC.
Y bueno, en realidad contar un poco cómo nació la idea de conformar esta organización indígena fue en 1977.
He wants to tell the story about how this organization was born in 1977.
Y en ese entonces mis abuelos, mis padres vivían un problema porque justamente en ese entonces era la dictadura.
His grandparents and parents, they were having problems because during this time there was a dictatorship in the country.
Y entonces los indígenas nos organizábamos y luchar contra lo que es el tema del racismo, la desigualdad.
The indigenous community started to be more organized to fight against inequality and discrimination.
Y también para hacer las reuniones o organizar era muy difícil entonces se iban mucho más a la montaña o el páramo, como nosotros lo llamamos.
But it was a little bit difficult because of geographically reasons, and the mountains, it wasn't that easy to go to one place to another.
Y recién en 1980, de haber organizado todos estos 3 años, se hace reconocer a través del Estado, porque ya estamos dentro de la democracia.
In 1980, they were recognized because the democracy was established again in the country.
Entonces, desde ahí hemos venido proponiendo las leyes para las poblaciones indígenas en el Ecuador.
Since that moment, they've been fighting to promote the laws to protect the indigenous communities in the country.
Y dentro de eso hemos podido que conste dentro de la Constitución política el tema del idioma, el tema más que todo de la cultura, la vestimenta y todo.
They have achieved to be recognized in the Constitution, the way that they dress, and also the language.
Porque antes no éramos reconocidos por el Estado.
Before that, they were not recognized by the government.
Y bueno, podríamos contar la problemática actual que tenemos de mucha gente de las comunidades. Hay migración del campo a la ciudad.
They are facing different problems. One of them is to go from the communities to the cities.
Porque no hay trabajo en la comunidad, o entonces ellos tienen que migrar y después regresar a reunirse con la familia.
Okay. Because they can find jobs in their communities, so they have to go to the cities, make some money, and then go back to the communities to see their families.
Y la migración nos trae problemas como la pérdida de la identidad cultural que tenemos, el idioma, todo eso.
All these processes are having negative impact in their communities because they are losing their identity.
Y también los cambios en la alimentación, entonces ellos en la ciudad aprenden a comer otras cosas realmente, o otros hábitos que no es lo de la comunidad.
Also, when they go to the city, they learn different habits about food, so they take this to the community and the dynamics change.
Y también con eso pensamos que los hombres van a la ciudad a trabajar, entonces solamente quedan las mujeres, y con eso decimos que el tema de la agrobiodiversidad también se pierde.
Men are the one who go to the city and work, and the women stay in the community, and they also have problems with this related to the agriculture part of the community.
Y también con eso decimos que los niños pueden, con esta mala alimentación tal vez, o no alimentación, entonces hay desnutrición también en los niños.
Because of the new types of the new habits that they are learning in the city, they have an impact in the children, and this is how they start with having problems with malnourished.
Y bueno, también como amenazas.
Threats.
También decimos que tenemos problemas con la explotación irracional de los bosques.
They are also having problems with forest exploitation.
Y también la frontera agrícola va avanzando más cerca a la reserva.
Okay, so the boundaries between the communities and the reserve are kind of disappearing because of the agriculture purposes.
También el monocultivo, como nosotros lo llamamos, las haciendas siembran mucho, solamente un producto, y con eso también puede afectarnos mucho más.
They're also losing the diversity of the crops because the big farms are focusing producing just one of them.
Y más que todo ahora botan todos los árboles nativos y hoy están sembrando lo que es la palma africana que le llamamos nosotros para extraer el aceite.
Okay, they're cutting their own trees to start planting the African palm to produce oil.
Y también las haciendas tienen la ganadería en la parte más alta, entonces, y con eso también causa problemas en los humedales que tenemos.
Okay. The cows that the farms have also are making problems in their own land.
Y muchas veces los incendios pueden terminar mucho con lo que es la vegetación, todo eso. Entonces, el incendio también decimos que es un problema que debemos controlar mucho.
They are also have to deal with fire problems in the forest.
Y bueno, invasión de tierras, queremos decir que en unos ciertos sectores hay donde no hay la delimitación, entonces la gente van, entonces se sientan ahí, entonces decimos que es una invasión que está haciendo, entonces para eso tenemos que tener los títulos de propiedad.
They also have to deal with problems with the limits of their own lands. So some people go and stay in other places that they shouldn't, but it's because the government hasn't recognized or give them the titles for ownership.
Y bueno, también dentro de la reserva hay mucha riqueza que sería también el tema de la minería.
They're also dealing with problems with mining inside the reserve.
Y por esa razón las grandes empresas están tratando de extraer lo que es la minería, entonces hoy estamos diciendo no, porque va a contaminar el agua, nos va a terminar el agua.
The mining companies are trying to exploit the resources at the reserve, and they have started to fight against them.
Bueno, yo creo que la cacería de los animales también lo hemos prohibido porque en realidad los animales también pueden ayudar a controlar lo que es el tema de la población ambiental y todo eso.
They have forbidden the animal hunting because the animals help to preserve the natural resources or the environment in their communities.
Bueno, con la minería decimos que nos están envenenando los ríos.
The mining activities are poisoning the rivers.
Y también hemos estado viendo también el mal manejo de las lagunas que tenemos.
They have had problems with the water management in their lakes.
Y bueno, hemos escuchado mucho del cambio climático y eso creo que también nos está afectando a las poblaciones indígenas en el Ecuador.
He believes that climate change is also having an impact in their communities.
Bueno, en realidad, bueno, nosotros, nuestra propuesta dentro de la organización es tal vez crear este pequeño desarrollo con identidad.
Their idea is to create an identity, a community identity.
Y como organización campesina estamos constituidos por cabildos que serían las autoridades comunitarias.
As an organization, they have what they call cabildos.
y también los grupos de mujeres que realizan todas estas actividades.
Group of women that they develop all these activities.
Entonces tenemos grupos de productores,
As you can see there, they have all these units inside their organization, and he's talking now about the producer associations.
y bueno, yo creo que para el tema del agua hemos también creado autoridades comunitarias del agua.
They also have authorities to deal with all the problems with the water.
Y la unión de todos esos conformamos la UNORCAD. Conformamos todo eso, se hace la organización que es la UNORCAD.
Okay. All of these form the UNARCAC.
Y también dentro de lo que es la identidad cultural, estamos hablando en el tema de la salud indígena, que están más que todo conformada dentro de toda esta propuesta de salud.
They also work in cultural identity, in subjects related to indigenous health, gastronomy, and the other activities.
Entonces también dentro de la conservación de recursos naturales hablamos el tema de la agrobiodiversidad o de la biodiversidad.
They are also involved with agrobiodiversity.
Y bueno, también hablamos de que tenemos que educar mucho más, desde los niños, desde las escuelas. Entonces, bueno, eso voy a hablar más después también.
They also include education goals to teach them about different stuff, and he's going to explain more of it later.
Entonces, estamos hablando del desarrollo económico, pensando en nuestra gente, de crear pequeñas iniciativas de poder tener acceso al crédito.
They want their people to have access for microcredits.
Y para eso también estamos pensando en el tema de turismo, que puedan visitar las comunidades.
They are also thinking about tourism so people can go and visit their communities.
Tal vez la agroindustria que estamos pensando en pequeña escala sería para que los productos, dar valor agregado a los productos tradicionales de las comunidades.
They plan to give a better value to their agroindustry products.
Y bueno, la apicultura, el tema de las abejas, vemos que si tenemos eso, también si ellos viven es una señal que está bien el ambiente también.
They're also involved with apiculture, and they believe if they're still alive, it's a good sign that the environment is going well.
Entonces, dentro de todas estas 4 áreas, pensamos que podemos hacer un desarrollo con identidad.
Okay. They believe that if they work on these areas, they can promote development and an identity.
Entonces, lo que estamos haciendo en el tema de la agricultura es la propuesta agroecológica, diversificación en el tema agricultura.
In agriculture, they are working in diversification of crops,
Conservación de variedades locales que tenemos dentro de las comunidades.
conservation of local varieties.
Y estamos haciendo también estos encuentros de intercambio de semillas y productos dentro del Ecuador con las comunidades.
They also have problems to interchange programs to talk about seed exchange in different parts in Ecuador.
Y también estamos promoviendo de que podamos hacer las comidas tradicionales o las comidas ancestrales para exponer a la gente para que coman algo sano.
Okay. They're also promoting to produce more traditional food, and they have this fair so people can know more about their ancestors and they can start eating this.
Bueno, en educación estamos trabajando en el tema nutricional, el tema de la agrobiodiversidad y también en el tema etnobotánica, que sería más el tema de las plantas medicinales.
In education, they are working in capacity building, agrobiodiversity, and ethnobotanical garden.
En salud estamos hablando más trabajar en el tema de lo que es la medicina tradicional indígena, recuperando todo lo que es los saberes.
Okay. They want to work again with their traditional knowledge.
Entonces, para eso estamos capacitando a la gente también, porque la gente mayor, como era oral, entonces todo como que cuando mueren van con toda la sabiduría.
Okay. In order to do that, they are bringing or giving training to the people so they won't lose what they have learned. And the problem that they have to deal with, there is no written, there are no books that are talking about traditional medicine. So this is why they are interested in training the young people.
Entonces yo creo que estamos ahí trabajando en el tema de gestores comunitarios en salud.
They're working to promote health workers in the community.
Y bueno, en educación ambiental estamos trabajando con los profesores desde las escuelas.
In environment, they are working with the teachers in the school.
Entonces estamos haciendo guías de la agrobiodiversidad.
They're working on guide for training and education in food.
Y guías de conservación del agua.
And guide for water conservation.
Y también dentro de esto, también con los padres y la escuela y los profesores estamos haciendo lo que llaman eventos de enlace entre la escuela y comunidad.
They're working with the parents and the teachers, and they are trying to make events to promote their work together.
Y también estamos trabajando en diálogos de saberes con los niños en las escuelas.
They work in knowledge sharing with the children in the schools.
Bueno, yo creo que por el tiempo vamos a pasar un poco más rápido. Entonces, bueno, el tema del territorio de agrobiodiversidad de la UNORCAC, tal vez podemos pasar uno más. Entonces, hablamos de todo lo que son las semillas y todo, ¿no?
As he doesn't have enough time, he's going to show and talk a little bit more about agrobiodiversity.
Y como conclusión, lo que hemos puesto es trabajar juntos el Estado y las organizaciones indígenas para mantener todo lo que es la riqueza natural, cultural que tenemos.
Okay. As a conclusion, they want to work together with the government as a group of indigenous organizations to keep their natural resources.
Y muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Ustedes.
It's very hard to see somebody who's come a long way, who has something very important to tell us about the world, and to feel this imperative of passing time. If you could expand time to fill an infinite space. They say when you have a near-death experience, it all gets done very quickly. But right here, we're just having a conference, and that's a different matter. But what you've heard today, unfortunately, we really don't have time for questions. We'd love to have questions, but please nab any of these people. I believe they're going to be hanging around for a while, And please talk to them if you have questions that have come up in your mind as you've been listening, because I've had many, as I'm sure many of you have as well. But what you're hearing is teamwork. You're hearing everybody's in it together. You're hearing the profoundly important role of Indigenous people, how that in many parts of the world is moving us, industrialized folks, a lot faster than our consciousness would normally bring us to move. And you're hearing about people who speak all languages and exist in all kinds of social situations, some far more difficult than at the material level, but not necessarily less inspired by enthusiasm and a sense of passion for social justice and environmental sustainability, and what all of us need, which is peace. Peace of mind, but also peace among all of us. Neil is just going to give us a few logistical bits of information, and then we'll move off to our next session.
Yeah, just very briefly, we have to move immediately to the next session in the program, and to try to catch up a little bit without really taking too much away. I'm hoping that we can reduce our break to 45 minutes from an hour. So go to the next session. We're now about 25 minutes past, are we?
Yes, we're 5 to noon. We're
5 to noon, and we're supposed to finish at 11:30. So we're 25 minutes behind now. I'm hoping that you can go to your session then. We're going to finish that session about 20 minutes late, and then we'll begin the afternoon about 5 to 10 minutes late. So we're starting a bit behind. We're hoping that we're going to catch up. So go to the next session. We might cut it short by 5 minutes. You can start to get your lunch, and then we will cut short the lunch by about 15 minutes or so. Okay?
It was a pleasure. It was an answer. It was nice. Nice. Okay, so you want to